All right, let's put the women and children in bed and go looking for dinner. John Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page as we get you set for another edition of my new podcast venture here with CBS Sports. Later in this show, we're going to be joined by UNLV head coach Josh Pastner. I want you to hit the like button and the subscribe button as well as we continue to churn out content that will be going 52 weeks out of the calendar year. We're going to get into all your questions as well later in the show about everything that's going on in college basketball. And I also want to remind you that this podcast in the next couple of weeks, hopefully sooner than that, will be all sorted out and you'll be able to find us on Spotify, on Apple. We are all working on that daily, trying to get things in order, as well as the name for this new venture, which again will be a constant content engine on the world of college basketball. But first, let's get to three big things. And the first big thing I want to talk about is obviously Purdue's retention. I was thinking over the weekend about big storylines entering next season in college basketball. And Purdue came to mind, obviously, because Purdue is going to be one of the most seasoned teams in college basketball entering next season. But it also got me to thinking, Purdue's season ended last year at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, which is obviously just a short drive from Purdue's campus in West Lafayette. And if Purdue goes to a Final Four next year, that will be the site of the Final Four in 2026, Lucas Oil Stadium. So it's almost like the mission for this group of Boilers is to get back to Lucas Oil Stadium. So I started to think about the geography, and I started to think about what it would be like for Purdue to be the number one seed in the Midwest and then go play in a Final Four down the road in Indianapolis from West Lafayette. If Purdue can be the one seed in the Midwest next year, it would play first and second round games in St. Louis. That's about 4 hours away from West Lafayette. And then it would play Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games in Chicago, which is about 2 hours from West Lafayette. Now, why are those things so important? And why are those things potentially a major storyline to look at entering next season? When you evaluate retention in college basketball now, even versus years ago, it is substantially more important because of the roster turnover that exists in the sport. And Purdue now is set to return 86% of its scoring from last season's team that went to the Sweet 16 and lost to Houston in the final seconds, where? At Lucas Oil Stadium. 3 of the Boilers starters from a year ago, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, not only started last season, but also started 2 years ago when Purdue lost in the national championship game in 2024 to UConn. That is unheard of from a retention perspective in college basketball. Now, beyond that, beyond all those things, there are only 5 players in college basketball that are set to return next year that were All-Americans last year. 2 of them are on Purdue's roster, Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. The 5 players that are set to return to college basketball next year that were All-Americans during the 24-25 season, Smith, Kaufman-Renn, Donovan Dent, who has transferred from New Mexico to UCLA, JT Toppin at Texas Tech, and PJ Haggerty, a Memphis transfer who many people expect will wind up at NC State. But the storyline is about Purdue. Elite retention. The National Player of the Year favorite in Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, an All-American big man, Fletcher Lawyer, who will be a 4-year starter at the 2, and a path to get back to Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Boilers lost to Houston in the Sweet 16 last season. If Purdue is the 1 seed in the Midwest, and it will start next season, either 1 or 2 in the polls, depending on what Milos Uzan does in the NBA draft process and whether or not he returns to Houston. The path for Purdue, with the best retention that looks like we're going to see in the sport, will be St. Louis to Chicago, back to Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium for a chance to win a national championship and play in a Final Four in its home state down the road from Mackey Arena in West Lafayette. Now, 2 years ago, Purdue advanced to the national championship game and lost to UConn. And UConn, in my opinion, has a potential burgeoning star next season at center in Tarris Reed. And I looked over the numbers over the weekend. And Tarris Reed, when he's able to stay on the floor for UConn, is a major, major producer. Last year in games where Tarris Reed played 20 minutes or more for the Huskies, he's about 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 blocks. And if you look at the evolution of UConn's rotation next year, Samson Johnson is out at center and Tarris Reed steps in. And one of the main reasons, and this really is similar to what I was talking about a couple of moments ago with Purdue, but one of the main reasons why you got to be bullish on Dan Hurley and UConn is because of the returning personnel in this program. The Huskies return 3 of their top 4 scorers from last year's team that had a lead on Florida late in the second half in the round of 32. I watched the game earlier this morning on the elliptical machine in the final moments. And one of the main reasons why I'm so bullish on UConn is because of Tarris Reed getting a bigger piece of the pie. But one of the main issues for Tarris Reed is staying on the floor. In each NCAA tournament game that UConn played last March, he had 4 fouls. He played 16 minutes against Florida, and he played 21 minutes against Oklahoma. When he's on the floor for 20 minutes per game or more, he's 14-9-2 for UConn last season. Reed also had major foul trouble when UConn played at St. John's in the Garden, only played 20 minutes because he had 5 fouls. Staying on the floor is a major, major area of concern for Tarris Reed. But if he can do that, he is in position, in my opinion, to be right there as an all Big East first-team caliber player. And if you split the atom with the Big East, I know they did great in the transfer portal. I know Creighton added Owen Freeman and Josh Dix from Iowa. I know that St. John's had Bryce Hopkins, Jozon Sannon, and Ian Jackson coming through the portal. But if you look now, if Tarris Reed does what Tarris Reed is capable of doing, you're looking at he and Zuby Ejiofor of St. John's from being probably the 2 best big men in the Big East, unless Thomas Sorber from Georgetown comes back to school. He's projected to be selected somewhere between 20 and 30 in the NBA draft, but hasn't given an official declaration yet. You're looking at Zuby Ejiofor and Tarris Reed as being the 2 best big men in the Big East and 2 of the best big men in the country as well. The Big East does not have a great deal of retention when you look at its elite players from last season. From the all Big East teams a year ago, the only players that are set to return next season to the conference are Zuby Ejiofor, who I believe will be the Big East preseason player of the year, 2 players on UConn, Solo Ball and Alex Caravan, and then Thomas Sorber from Georgetown, who's a wild card because he's currently in the NBA draft process. Tarris Reed stays on the floor. Tarris Reed will be an all Big East first-team caliber player, and he will challenge, in my opinion, Zuby Ejiofor for the title of being the best big in the conference. Zuby Ejiofor, though, in my opinion, will be the Big East preseason player of the year and maybe the early favorite to be the national defensive player of the year when all things are equal. But Reed, to me, is going to be one of those players when I do my early season lists that, players who are a little bit off the radar that could become a star during 24-25. Now, the ACC made some headlines last week by shifting from 20 league games to 18 league games. And now the ACC obviously has had a very, very rough couple of years in college basketball. Not necessarily to the point of where it performed in the NCAA tournament, because if you look at the ACC the last 2 years, NC State was in the Final Four in 2024, and Duke was in the Final Four in 2025. But the ACC, a once proud conference, has taken a major step back in college basketball's landscape. And I have felt, when you looked at the quality of the teams that the ACC has put in the NCAA tournament in each of the last 2 years, twice, the ACC did not deserve to have one of those teams in the NCAA tournament. Virginia did not deserve to make the field in 2024, and North Carolina did not deserve to make the field in 2025. I know North Carolina beat San Diego State in the first four, but I would have had West Virginia and Indiana in the field ahead of the Tar Heels last season. Credit to the Tar Heels, though, for beating San Diego State with ease in Dayton. But we're looking now at a conference in the ACC that is entering one of the more pivotal seasons as a league than we have seen in quite some time. Now, the good news for the ACC, the coaching cycle, at least on paper, is heading in their favor. Virginia is going to be significantly improved under Ryan Odom. NC State's going to be significantly improved under Will Wade. You have to feel the same about the job that Jay Lucas is doing at Miami, adding Trey Donaldson and True Washington and Ernest Uday and Malik Renew through the transfer portal. On paper, Miami should be one of the most improved teams in the country next year. And it's also a really big year for Micah Shrewsbury at Notre Dame. But here are some of the issues with ACC basketball in the last 10 years. And these are just facts of life. Since 2017, the league has lost the following head coaches: Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, Rick Pitino, Tony Bennett, Mike Bray, Leonard Hamilton, Jim Larinaga, and Buzz Williams. Hall of Fame head coaches, institutions in the sport. And here's some other things with the ACC that maybe a lot of people don't know. Syracuse and Florida State, two of the biggest brands, 4 or 5 years ago associated with the ACC, have not been to the NCAA tournament since 2021. Virginia, a constant presence at the top of college basketball when Tony Bennett was at his apex in Charlottesville, has not won an NCAA tournament game since the Cavaliers beat Texas Tech for the national championship in 2019. Notre Dame, a proud brand in this conference, has been to one NCAA tournament since 2017. And Miami, a program that under Jim Larinaga went to the Elite Eight in 2022 and went to the Final Four in 2023, has missed the last two NCAA tournaments. The 25-26 season is as pivotal a year as the ACC has had in quite some time. The good news is NC State, Miami, Notre Dame should all be vastly improved. Should all be vastly improved, in my opinion. NC State, Miami, Virginia, Notre Dame will all be significantly better than last season. The ACC going from 20 to 18 games. What was that John Wooden quote? Never mistake activity for achievement. ACC has to win more games in November and December. That's what's going to determine what this conference looks like in terms of NCAA tournament representation. But those four programs I mentioned, NC State, Virginia, Miami, Notre Dame, has to give this league mileage next season. Has to. League hasn't gotten anything out of Syracuse and Florida State in terms of making the NCAA tournament in 4 years. The ACC has not gotten an NCAA tournament win out of Virginia since the Cavaliers beat Texas Tech for the 2019 national championship. It's been a passage in the ACC. We'll see what the new era looks like moving forward. Want to take your questions as well as we get into some of the big topics in college basketball. We're also going to hear from UNLV's Josh Pastner in just a minute. John Rothstein here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, John Rothstein back here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It always helps out. And remember, we're going to be all over the podcast areas here in the next couple of weeks. We hope sooner than that on Spotify, on Apple. We are still rebranding this venture, but getting ready to take you 52 weeks out of the college basketball year with all the content that you could possibly want. But first, now your questions. J-Rod6 wants to know, John, what team do you think got the best out of the transfer portal? I am going to go with St. John's. St. John's had the best transfer class in college basketball. Ian Jackson from North Carolina, Jozon Santa from Arizona State, Isaiah Sellers from Stanford, and Bryce Hopkins from Providence. There's a lot of new faces. There's some point guard questions for the Red Storm under Rick Pitino, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. St. John's will enter the 25-26 season with the most talented roster in college basketball. And if you are a St. John's fan, you have to understand that this is the golden era of college basketball for St. John's. St. John's fans have suffered for 25 years. Up until last season, had not won an NCAA tournament game since 2000. St. John's, up until last season, hadn't won a Big East tournament title since 2000, and also hadn't won an outright Big East regular season title since 1985. If you are a St. John's fan right now, enjoy every single day, because this is the golden age of St. John's basketball. Nick was just hit a question that I just talked about. Is this podcast going to be on Spotify? Absolutely, Nick. Again, we are working on all these things, the name of the show, the branding of the show, when it's going to be available for you in audio. If you can't join us here and you want to listen on your way to work, if you're working out in the gym, this podcast is going to be all over Spotify. It's going to be all over Apple. We are not going away. We are building each and every episode to bring you the best content that we can in college basketball. Puff Does MMA wants to know, John, do you think the moves Texas made in the transfer portal will make them an SEC contender? This is what I'll say about Texas. I thought Sean Miller did a really, really nice job retaining some of the key pieces on an NCAA tournament team for the Longhorns last year under Rodney Terry. Tremont Mark, Kendall Weaver, also Jordan Pope were retained. Dalen Swain comes from with Sean Miller from Xavier to Texas. I also like the addition of Simeon Wilcher from St. John's. Texas, to me, should be an NCAA tournament team under Sean Miller. And again, I'll really, really split the atom after the NBA draft early entry process is done and we know exactly who's going to go where and those final players in the transfer portal kind of funnel out. But Texas, to me, should be a top 25-ish team to start next season and should unequivocally be an NCAA tournament team next year under Sean Miller. And again, remember, the first game that Sean Miller is going to coach as the head coach of Texas is going to be November 4th in Charlotte against Duke. I can't say enough about how great it is that we have all these big-time college basketball matchups during the first week of the season. It is great for the sport. Blake Tology wants to know, John, I fast forward to the future and inform you either Illinois or USC won the Big Ten, which is more believable. Well, you have to say Illinois based on that program's history under Brad Underwood. The Illini have went heavy on the Euro game. There is a lot of international flavor right now with Illinois, who still have Tomislav Ivicic back in the pivot. They've signed Andrei Stojakovic from Cal. They've added also Zvonimir Ivicic from Arkansas, Tomislav's brother. There's also a number of foreign prospects. Ty Rodgers is coming back off a redshirt year. Kai Boswell is back for Illinois. Illinois, again, another team that I think is probably a top 20-ish team to start next season. It's going to be a little interesting to see how this team does defensively, but Illinois, to me, more likely than USC in terms of winning a Big Ten title. But here's one thing. I don't think we understood how hard it was going to be for these West Coast teams, USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, to go constantly west to east and travel. It is a major, major toll on those kids, those coaching staffs, all of it. It is a major, major toll to do it multiple times. I've talked to a number of coaches who are at these West Coast schools who tell me about the fatigue that their program and their players and their coaches feel by mid-February. I don't know if we are ever going to see a time or a season where UCLA, Oregon, Washington, USC ever wins a Big Ten regular season title. I think the travel west to east is too much of a factor. Now, another new coach on the West Coast is Josh Pastner. He's taking over at UNLV after a couple of stints at Georgia Tech and Memphis, and the head coach of the Runnin' Rebels joins us coming up next on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page.
From
the first swing to the final hole. Recap the PGA Championship with Clubhouse Report. Thursday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, now welcome in the newly minted head coach of the UNLV Runnin' Rebels. He is Josh Pastner. Josh, welcome. How would you describe the last month of your life?
John, my last month of my life has been fast, has been furious, tons of excitement, tons of enthusiasm. Look, I loved being part of television, loved every second of it, met incredible people, worked with incredible people. But to be able to get back on the sidelines, to be able to get back into coaching and recruiting and dealing with people and thinking about all the different ways you want to try to play and what you got to do that maybe worked well in your previous 14 years as a head coach, and other areas that you felt, okay, we've got to get better in these areas, and to have the opportunity to wear the four letters of UNLV, as I have it right here above my heart, the Runnin' Rebels, the history of the program, to be able to be sitting in this chair, John. When they gave me this polo to put on, the back of my neck on my hair stood up, the goosebumps I had. It was like putting on that little league jersey to say you're sitting as the head coach at UNLV. I mean, anybody who's in basketball knows the history of UNLV. And then you include that being part of an incredible conference in the Mountain West Conference with great coaches, great players, great teams and programs. So you have an opportunity to compete against, at such a high level again. And just, I can't express the amount of enthusiasm I have. You know me well enough, John, is what you see with me is what you get. And just a sincere gratefulness and appreciation to be able to put this polo on that says UNLV.
What is it like being a college basketball coach today versus when you were last in college basketball as the head coach of Georgia Tech?
Yeah, John, it's different. I mean, look, totally different. And I tell you what, I love the new climate of college basketball. I know there's been a lot of negativity about it on what's going on, and yes, there are some things that need to probably have some direction and change here or there. But overall, I love the new aspect of how college basketball is set up. Again, maybe it's just by nature because I look at the glass as overflowing, just by my personality. That all being said, the time when I was at Georgia Tech or even Memphis or even as an assistant at Arizona, John, you would all think about the focus of high school recruiting as in terms of 2 to 3 years you would spend recruiting a young prospect. And then it'd come down to 5 official visits. Whether you get the prospect or not, if you get them, it's total elation. If you don't get them, it's devastation. And now recruiting is such that it's really streamlined and probably even more efficient than ever in a 2 to 3 week process. So it's much more efficient. Now, there are some things that need to be cleaned up. Like I mentioned, there's no doubt about it. You and I have talked on many times about many of the current rules, even prior to me being the coach at UNLV. But again, I've loved every second of it. I've enjoyed it. I'm appreciating the journey through all this, and including the recruiting part and building a team and trying to put together the right staff and getting out in the community and trying to, re-energize everyone. And so I've enjoyed it all along the way.
Now, Josh, your career is really, really unique because you won a national championship as a player at the University of Arizona. You then became an assistant coach at Arizona, and then obviously went with John Calipari to Memphis, where you eventually became the head coach, and then you led Georgia Tech to an ACC tournament title in 2021. Your entire basketball career was going like this on an incline, and then a couple of years ago, Georgia Tech told you that you were not going to return as head coach. I'm curious, for somebody whose whole career was on an incline, what was that experience like at Georgia Tech at the end?
Well, look, I mean, there's a few things. You're right. You go from the top of the mountain of winning the ACC championship, and then just very quickly right around then, you just the opportunity to not continue to coach at Georgia Tech happens. That's just part of the business. And I love my time at Georgia Tech, and I don't look at it as any negativity. It actually gave me an opportunity because of that. The way I looked at it, it gave me almost another career because I got an opportunity to go into television and work for some incredible networks and the opportunities of people that I met. I mean, being at ESPN, being at Turner, being at NBC and Peacock, being at CBS Sports. I mean, the people from the bosses to the producers to the colleagues, all the people that I got to work with was incredible. I wouldn't change that experience for anything. And I loved my time. And it also, I believe, made me a better coach. I got to have an opportunity to really watch programs, talk to coaches, really study basketball without all the pressure of just about winning and losing on every decision you make in anything that you do. It was like a sabbatical. On top of that, I got a chance to kind of reconnect with my kids and be around my family, which was awesome. And then also to make sure I was taking care of my health and probably I wasn't going on the best avenue in that either, just on my the way I was, the stress that I was probably putting on myself, and then plus the not good eating habits, late at night, and the amount of calories I was consuming. So I looked at it as a positive. Did I want to be let go at Georgia Tech? Of course not. Absolutely not. But hey, that's part of the deal. You're sometimes you're as high as the high, and sometimes you can get knocked down. But like I said, the opportunity that door that opened to be able to do other things and see a different way of life was incredible. And I think, and I believe that those 2 years being in part of television and having the opportunity to really study the game will make me a better coach moving forward. I really believe that. And I'm looking forward to that challenge and that opportunity that presents itself here in front of us as we go with the great tradition and the history of UNLV. Think about this, John. When you think of Las Vegas right now, it's the capital of the sports world. It's the epicenter of the entertainment industry. How do you think Las Vegas was born and made? I know everyone thinks about the casino world. I really believe it was the 80s and 90s of the Jerry Tarkanian, his staff, and his team and his players, what they did with that program and their winning. It was a spectacle at that time. It was the showtime of the Lakers during that time in college basketball. It's what put Las Vegas on the map nationally. Las Vegas is, because of what it is today, I truly believe that, is because of what Jerry Tarkanian, his staff, his players, his program did here at UNLV, and then the continuation of it, even after Coach Tarkanian. There's been some wonderful coaches, some high-level players, some great years, and we hope to just to try to have some success to re-energize, reignite, and put a lot of excitement back into UNLV.
Well, we're definitely getting the recruiting pitch here. That was some answer for only the third question of this interview, but I'm curious. You had referenced how you became a better coach. Which coaches and which philosophies did you take from your sabbatical that you think you will implement with your own program here at UNLV?
John, I got to say this. Every radio show that I've done, anyone who's done our radio shows, whether it's Memphis or Georgia Tech, loved doing when I did the radio on our weekly radio show, because they knew they just needed to bring 3 questions prepared.
That's amazing.
And I was able to speak the whole hour. I was
exactly
on top of it. But I think for some of the things to answer what you're saying about that, John, just about the on the kind of the sabbatical, as I like to call it, or those 2 years out to really study, there's been a lot of things. I really had a chance to really go back of my 14 years as a head coach and watch so much game film of all the teams that I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of and as a head coach. And I really studied and watched things of things that we did well, that I felt, okay, this is really good, or things, we've got to be better in this area. We've got to clean this up. We weren't real sharp here. And how to make sure that we then translate that as we move to the next stage. Look, you've got to have really good players. John, you know that as well as I do, and anyone else in coaching. I mean, it's a player's game. You've got to have really good players. But as the leader and as the head coach, you've got to make sure that you're putting them in position to be successful, having opportunities for preparation. Proper preparation prevents poor performance, the 5 Ps. So these 2 years, I've really been able to watch our own teams that I was able to coach, but also, John, the other programs, whether it's being at shoot-arounds, watching game films in preparation for the studio work or TV work that I was doing, and seeing how teams were doing different ways they were covering ball screens, offenses they were running, out of bounds defense.
Well, who specifically did you take stuff from that you were studying? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, you know what, John, there was quite a few, and I studied a lot because I don't want to shortchange anyone, because I talked to a lot of coaches. And here's what I would tell you, John. There was coaches I really.
So you're wearing red right now for UNLV. I'm starting to think you're also working for Switzerland too. How things
well,
are right down the middle.
No, but let me just say this: there were some teams, even, and I'll go back to this, even in the ACC, John, that I really wanted to ask questions and really study what they did on both ends of the floor. Maybe certain teams I really wanted to ask what they did offensively, and certain teams I wanted to ask what they did defensively. And I wasn't going to be able to do that in the ACC because I was competing against them. They weren't going to let me in their practices. They weren't going to give me their secrets. I was really able to study and talk to a lot of coaches in that league that we competed against at a very high level. And a lot of these guys are in the Hall of Fame, or going to be in the Hall of Fame, all-time greats at their schools, that I was able to really spend a lot of time asking questions, picking their brain, and really getting some of their secret sauce in a sense. And then obviously around the country, other leagues, other programs. I mean, going there at their shoot-arounds or practices. But as I mentioned, being in the studio and really watching the tape and the game film in preparation for that, seeing all these other programs where, John, when you're in the season, you're focused on your current team. That's what you're focused on. So this gave me an opportunity to really take a broader 30,000-foot approach and see the whole bowl of wax on that.
Well, it's well documented, Josh, that in addition to being a potential podcast host, whenever you get out of coaching, that, you obviously were under the tutelage of John Calipari when you were at Memphis. I know he shaped so much about how you market a program, build a program. But before that, you were obviously a disciple of Lud Olsen. And I remember in a lot of our conversations, you told me that Coach Olsen took a leap of faith to leave Iowa for the warm weather of the West to go to Tucson and build a program at Arizona. How much did you going to the desert over the last 5 or 6 weeks remind you and really kind of draw a parallel to what Lud Olsen did in his career going to Tucson?
Well, look, I mean, there really is no parallel on that, because a guy like Lud Olsen and Jerry Tarkanian, both coaches who I feel were the superpower coaches on the West Coast during that 80s and 90s runs, those years, had the juggernauts of the programs, both for Arizona and UNLV. And both guys elevated not only a school. Coach Olsen did it at Arizona. Jerry Tarkanian did it at UNLV. Not only elevated a school, John, but elevated an entire city and community and put it on such a national map through the success of basketball. So what I would like to say is what Coach Olsen did to going to University of Arizona, or Jerry Tarkanian going to UNLV. And obviously I worked for Coach Olsen at the University of Arizona, both as a player and then as an assistant coach. And I always felt working for him, every practice was literally like a clinic. He was a clinic every time he coached and stepped on the floor practice-wise. But that being said, I can be in no comparison of a Jerry Tarkanian or a Lud Olsen, because those guys have already put all the hard work into building different things, whether it's Coach Olsen at U of A or Jerry Tarkanian at UNLV. I just hope that as the gatekeeper and sitting in this chair, because this is not my program, John, it will never be my program. I'm just sitting here as the gatekeeper in this chair, trying to move things forward and trying to re-energize and hopefully have some great success as we move forward. And then on the other opportunity to be able to learn from, as you mentioned, about Coach Lud Olsen, a Hall of Famer, to learn from John Calipari, as you mentioned, another Hall of Famer, to have that background and that kind of that understudy has been absolutely awesome. And so I've been fortunate to be at a very high level for a long, long time in basketball, whether it's been TV, whether it's been coaching, whether it's been playing, whether it's been AAU basketball. I mean, grassroots basketball. I mean, so I've been around high level, and it's been really cool. And I do not take a day of it for granted. John, you know it. On my X handle, Coach J. Pastner, I have those three things that you and I talk about it a lot, that every day is a gift, every breath is a gift, every heartbeat's a gift, and nothing changes here on the appreciation of being at UNLV. The running Rebels, John Rothstein.
All right, well, the infomercial continues here, but Josh, we have to also get to reality. UNLV has not played in the NCAA tournament since 2013. That's over a decade ago. How do you get the brand back?
Well, look, I think a couple things. Number one, you're in a great basketball league in the Mountain West Conference. So you have great opportunities. Now, this is great coaches in here with great programs. You know the success that's been here in these last years of the Mountain West and the number of teams coming out of this conference to the tournament. That being said, look, it starts, you got to get really good players. You got to do that. I think this offseason we did a nice job in the portal. But again, you got to get to June, July, and August and gel them together and put you're really starting over with 13 new guys coming part of a team. And then we've got to bring the unity of a team together. We've got to spend a lot of time. I've got to spend a lot of time making sure, when you talk about building that brand back, John, it got to be in the community. This is Las Vegas's team. This is the city's team. This is the former student athletes that played here team, all the former coaches team. This is the team that all the current students and the alumni of this great school. This is their program, their team. So we've got to re-energize them, re-excite them, have them back to be enthused about their program. Now, we've got to do our job on the floor with putting a great product on the floor. And that means you've got to play the right way. It's not just about playing hard. It's about competing. It's how hard you compete. And I think everyone wants to get back to the running Rebels, but to get back, to have any chance to get back to the running Rebels, John, you've got to be great defensively. So that's where it's got to start with us. We've got to be very good on the defensive end. And then we've got to go from there. We've got to play the right way and have just a great competitive excellence at everything that we do on every single possession. And hopefully from there, the running Rebel nation will come back and support their program.
Well, Josh, obviously you're excited about UNLV. You referenced the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is going to stay in its present form for one more year. So in order to give UNLV a chance in the future to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large team, you're going to have to play a great non-conference schedule. We know that you're going to play 3 games in the Players Era tournament. We know you're going to be going back to Memphis to be playing the Tigers at FedEx Forum. Aside from that, are there any highlights next year for your non-conference schedule?
Well, you know what, John, 2 things. Number one is we're working through that with our scheduling right now. And I didn't know this when I got the job, but I've understood it now that I've gotten the job. There's a lot of things that come through Thomas and Mack where we play at that is just not UNLV men's basketball, because there's a period of that when we're not after the Players Era tournament, every year a big thing is the rodeo here. It's the national rodeo. So you're out of the arena for almost 2 weeks. So you've got to figure that out. There's some other opportunities elsewhere. So right now, figuring out the gym, the structure of the gym when you have the availability. But then the second part, John, is you want to make sure that you schedule yourself properly to give yourself the best chance that if you don't win the conference tournament, that you have a chance to be an at-large. Now, look, that's hard to do. Scheduling, I've always talked about recruiting and hiring a staff is so important, but doing great on scheduling might be the most important. When I got the job at Georgia Tech, I talked to Coach Krzyzewski, Coach K. We had a long talk, and he talked about that. We talked about probably the most important thing outside of recruiting and staff hiring is scheduling. Yeah. And he was so right on that. I mean, you don't get to become the winningest coach without knowing what you're doing. And he's right on that. And you know this more so than ever, John. that scheduling, you're predicting, obviously, you're forecasting, you're doing the best job you can based on the numbers because of the quads and the nets and all the rankings that go out there. But you've got to win your games, but you've got to put yourself in the position to have opportunities. And I do think there's going to be great opportunities within the Mountain West. Then you got to balance that out into the non-conference schedule on finding the best ways to put yourself in great positions. So it's a really balancing act, and you're really spending a lot of time. And here's the other thing, John, with scheduling, most times when I was at Georgia Tech or Memphis scheduling, you could be done with your scheduling because you would know the other team's roster and what's going on.
Sure.
Right now, there's a lot of teams out there, their rosters aren't completed because there's still so many student athletes in the portal right now, and rosters aren't complete. So you're still trying to forecast, predict, and think through things on how it will be when you schedule. So that's all part of the deal in getting things through with scheduling.
Well, part of that non-conference schedule, as I mentioned, is UNLV going back to Memphis next season to play the Tigers at FedEx Forum. What is it going to be like for Josh Pastner to walk in the FedEx Forum as the coach of a different team?
Yeah, John, look, I same thing as we talked about Georgia Tech. I loved my time at Georgia Tech. I love my time at Memphis. I mean, we had great 7 years. We won a lot of games, just like at Georgia Tech. You won a lot of games. You met so many great people. Same thing at Memphis. I've had so many great friends from both parts, and loved my time there. Look, 3 of my daughters were born in Memphis, and so I'm excited for the opportunity to go back. I thought Penny Hardaway this past year did an outstanding job. I know they're loading up in the portal. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for UNLV for a quad 1 game, as we were just talking about scheduling. I mean, that's going to be a quad 1 game for sure on the road. So a great opportunity for UNLV Running Rebels. But it's going to be fun to be back in that arena, coaching against the Memphis Tigers, against all those great years that we had when I was a head coach there, and really, really excited and looking forward to it. And like I said, I've got a lot of great friends, a lot of great people, tremendous memories there at Memphis. It should be a heck of a game. I would expect, John, that you will be there in person at somehow, some way, because that's a big time game. Come on, UNLV, Memphis. John, you've got to be there, man. You've got to be in person. We don't want you calling it from studio. I'm hoping your bosses allow you to get there in person to cover that game.
That's above my pay grade. But I appreciate your enthusiasm to have me in attendance. Now, before we get obviously to anything else regarding next season, just your curious impressions of the roster that you've put together.
John, I like the roster. I love the roster, but I haven't got to coach them yet. That's what's different. Usually when I took over the other programs, I had some guys left over that you can coach. We were able to retain, because everyone was in the portal, I was able to retain 2 players. And I told those 2 players this spring, I don't know if we're signing anybody else. This is how our mentality was. I don't know if we're going to sign anybody else. We might just have 2 players the rest of the year. But we're going to treat these spring workouts like it's 5. We're going to go in for all of our games next year. We're playing 5-on-2. That is what I know. We might not sign anyone else, but you 2 guys are going to step on that floor, and we're going to play 5-on-2. And so the conditioning this offseason, the way we're going to train you, the way we're going to work you, our whole focus, our mentality is that we got to have you both ready. So when we play whomever we're playing next year's non-conference and conference season, we might only have 2 guys, but you 2 are going to be so ready to go and such at a high level. That is how we attacked our spring workouts, because that's all we had here. And I wanted to take that approach and set that tone, John. And this is how we're going to work. This is how we're going to be. In my 14 years as a head coach, we have had survivability on player development. I'm a big believer on that, player development. Even as much as we talk about the portal, the NIL, player development, getting guys better. That's been a survivability of myself and our staff and through my entire time as a basketball coach. Sweat equity, sweating with the guys, being in the trenches, being in the foxhole with those guys, understanding that this is how we're going to work has been what I believe in to my core, and anyone that's worked with me understands that is That is item line number one, A+. Nothing else matters about the survivability of what we do is getting guys better. That's who we've got to be about. And we've taken that same approach, even for the 2 guys that we were able to keep and retain for this year. We had that mentality moving forward. And once we get everybody here in June, which I am so excited about, I think it's going to be, we got a chance to do some really good things. That being said, that's on paper. No one cares what anyone did from last year's team that we recruited from. No one cares what anyone did in high school. It's a brand new year. You got to earn everything you're going to get. You've got to be such a competitor. You've got to have such great competitive excellence. You've got to have that mentality every time we're on that practice floor, which will then lead to the games. It's got to be who we are every second of the way, all about competitive excellence.
It's the first time I think I've ever used or ever heard somebody use survivability in a response. So kudos to you for that. Josh, let's wrap on this. I don't want to put obviously a focal point right now on wins and losses, but for you personally, what are the biggest things you hope to achieve in your first year as UNLV's head coach?
Well, John, look, I mean, right now, I mean, and look, who doesn't want to say you're going to win it? You want to win the national championship. You want to go 40-0. You want to win the Mountain West Conference. You want to do all those things. Look, who doesn't want to do that? Every team that tips off when they get their team settled in the summer, that's what their mentality is that's what they want to win. They want to win every game they play. They want to win every possession they play. I understand that. So let's take winning out for the side, because that's why you're in sports. There's a scoreboard. That's right. What makes it the greatest reality TV there is because there's a scoreboard, because you want to compete. But really what I want us to do, you take that away for a second. I want us to be a team, as you mentioned from the beginning, to reignite and re-energize UNLV. And yes, winning helps. I get that. I know that. I've been around a long time in basketball. You can see the grays on both sides of my head now. I've been around a long time, enough to know that I get it about the winning part. But that being said, you've got to play the right way. And what is playing the right way? It's how you compete. It's about your competitive excellence. It's all those little things. It's that you're playing with such great appreciation, not entitlement, and you're playing that. And I've always said this. And I'm really aligned to guys that believe in this. Literally winning that, forget the game, winning that individual possession is more important than actually breathing. That is my mentality a lot of times, is winning that possession is actually more important than breathing. And when guys, and in my time as a head coach, I've had a lot of guys who really believe that. And that's why, where I go back to the survivability word, guys who've been kind of under-recruited or undervalued, but they had a chip on their shoulder and they were ready to go right at you, because to win that loose ball or to win that possession, it was more important than actually breathing. And that's got to be the mentality. And I think that's part of what we've got to establish here. And I think the rest will take care of itself.
Josh Pastner, back in the college game as the head man at UNLV. If not, he would have a heck of a career as a telemarketer. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, John.
That's UNLV head coach Josh Pastner. We will be back after this.
The crowd loves champions. Gladiator 2 is an epic spectacle.
To amuse you is my only wish.
The glory is yours, not mine.
Very good. Gladiator 2, rated R, now streaming on Paramount+.
I'd like to thank UNLV head coach Josh Pastner for joining us here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. I'm John Rothstein, bringing you home right now. 3 good nuggets before we get you out of here. Nugget number 1, Kelsey's commitment. Kudos to Louisville head coach Pat Kelsey for his commitment to bringing back tremendous rivalries for the Cards during the non-conference portion of the schedule. Louisville announced last week that it will begin a 6-year series with Memphis next season. These two were obviously big-time rivals back in the old Conference USA days. I also reported last week that Louisville is going to do a 2-year neutral series with Cincinnati. Next year's game is at Heritage Bank Center in downtown Cincinnati, and in 2026, Louisville and Cincinnati will play at Freedom Hall in Louisville. Nugget number 2, St. John's is going to play Alabama at Madison Square Garden on November 8th. This is the start of a 2-year series between the two schools. St. John's will play in Birmingham coming up during the 26-27 series. So now this is what we're looking at, and this is still early April, but for week 1 in college basketball. Opening night, we got the doubleheader in Vegas, Arizona, Florida, and also BYU, Villanova. Night 2, you got Texas against Duke and Charlotte. Then that Saturday, the 8th, Alabama, St. John's in the Garden. And then the 9th of November in Chicago, Indiana against Marquette. One of the positives about fewer early season tournaments of significance in college basketball, because all of these games, for the most part, are NIL driven, is now we are getting marquee matchups at a higher level and with more volume throughout the sport. We are seeing games that feel Sweet 16 or Elite 8 caliber that we weren't normally getting in November and December during the non-conference portion of the schedule. It is elevating everything about college basketball. I know night 1, we got Florida and we got Arizona. Arizona is going to be a top 10 to 15 team to start next season. Florida, as long as it gets Alex Condon back next year and Ruben Chinyelu from the NBA draft process and can maybe add a guard, it will be a top 15 team. That is a second weekend NCAA tournament caliber game. Then you have BYU Villanova. BYU may be next year entering the most anticipated season in the history of the program against Villanova in its first game under Kevin Willard. And then night 2, you have Duke, Texas. A rising tide's lifting all boats. Then another thing before we get you out of here, the NBA Draft Combine begins this week in Chicago. A couple of names just to monitor as guys who are about, I don't want to say 50-50, but could either stay in the draft or come back to college and have a major impact. Thomas Sorber from Georgetown, we talked about him earlier. Tahad Pettiford from Auburn. Alex Condon from Florida. Darian Williams, who was at Texas Tech last year. He's in the transfer portal. Jameer Watkins, same deal. He's at Florida State. Now he's in the transfer portal. RJ Lewis, Big East Player of the Year at St. John's. He's in the portal. Yaxel Lendeborg, who was at UAB. Now he's at Michigan. And then Boogie Fland, who was at Arkansas, but he has also entered the transfer portal. These are some of the main names of the guys you want to monitor between now and the deadline on May 28th. Would like to thank UNLV head coach Josh Pastner for joining us here on the CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube page. I will be back later in the week with another episode. Please keep it posted to Twitter for more programming information and instructions. And remember, this is only May.